Hey y'all, so in this video I'm going to share 17 terms you have to know when you're starting a nonprofit. Let's get into it. Hey, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits, but also raise money to start their nonprofits. If you need help, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I drop videos all the time for y'all. All right, so today I'm going to do like a quick fire thing where I'm going to rattle off 17 terms that you should know if you're starting a nonprofit. A lot of people who are going into the nonprofit field have really not a lot of experience running a nonprofit. They may have worked for one, but really don't know what it's like to start and manage one. So there are just certain terms you just need to know as a foundation of any work that you're doing in this space. So I'm going to give you those 17 terms today. Now I'm going to briefly go over them just so you should be aware of them, but you're going to need to do your research to learn a little bit more. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time diving into each one. I'm just going to throw them out to you. So make sure you grab your notebooks and your pens and you're taking notes in this video. And hey, if you need help starting your nonprofit, check out the description box below because I have my nonprofit startup workbook linked below for you. So make sure you check that out. It helps guide you through your first year of starting your nonprofit. So the first term you should know is the Articles of Incorporation. These are a set of articles or paragraphs that establish your organization as a nonprofit in the state you're operating in. I have another video that goes into depth about what the articles are, so make sure you check out that video. Number 2 is the Secretary of State's office. So this is where you would go to figure out information to know how to start your nonprofit business. All right, so you should know how to access the website or where to go. So a lot of these offices in the COVID-19 pandemic were closed to the public, but you should at least be able to access the website so you can read up on the requirements for starting and maintaining your nonprofit. You should know this website very well because it's very likely that they have the forms linked on these websites for how to create your nonprofit and how to submit your annual forms if that's required, and also information about fees and how to pay fees to start your nonprofit and maintain your nonprofit. 501c3 status. So I actually have a whole video on what is 501c3 status. So make sure you check that out. I'll link it above. But it's essentially a tax exempt status at the federal level for people who are designated as doing charitable work. So you need to understand what that is and why that's different from just having a nonprofit. You can be a nonprofit but not necessarily have 501c3 status. So make sure you check out that video to learn more. Number 4 is charitable solicitation. So this is a general term. It may be called something different in your state, but this refers to your ability to ask people for money on behalf of your nonprofit. Most states in the United States require that you apply for charitable solicitation so that you can be put on their registry so that they can protect the residents of their state from scammers. So you need to just make sure that you check out the rules for charitable solicitation, not only in the state that you're operating in, but any state where you are getting money from people. So make sure you check that out and do your research on that because that has a lot of implications for your fundraising. Number 5 is a fundraising disclosure. So there are some states that require you to have a certain disclosure when you're asking for money. They may require that it be on your website. They may require that it be on your tax receipts or any kind of solicitations that you're putting out there. So you want to make sure you do your research with your state. It may be with the Secretary of State or the Attorney General's office, or it may be a different office that handles fundraising for charitable organizations, but do your research and make sure that you're aware of the important disclosures you need to have in place. Number 6, this seems like a simple one, but I don't want to make any assumptions. It's the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. So you all should know that this is the federal organization that basically handles all our income taxes and other types of taxes that are required at the federal level. Now, some people do get confused when it comes to taxes. What you need to understand is that when you get tax exempt status, it's usually federal tax exempt status. So that exempts you from having to pay tax on income you make, but that's different from payroll tax. That's different from sales tax. So the reason why I called out the IRS in particular is because I want to make sure you know that yes, they handle some types of tax, but not all tax. So just make sure you're clear on what you're responsible for with the IRS and what you're responsible for with the state. And also just make sure you know the requirements to have good governance with your nonprofit. So the IRS is going to want to know how you're spending your money, where you're getting your money from, how you're making financial decisions. So you need to understand what the IRS requires of you so that you can make sure that you're in their good graces. Number 7 is the 1023 form, and kind of a sub bullet to this, let's say 7A, is the 1023 EZ form. Okay, so this is the form that you would fill out if you want to apply for 501c3 tax exempt status. But you just got to know that there are 2 different forms. There's a streamlined version of this form, which is called the 1023 EZ. I break down the difference between these 2 in this video that I'm linking above. So make sure you do your research and know which form you should be using when you're applying for tax exempt status. Number 8, tax exempt. So I kind of explained this already, but you should know what it means to have federal tax exempt status. Again, if you didn't hear me before, it just means that you are exempt from income tax. But that does not mean that you're not exempt from different types of taxes like payroll or unemployment or things like that, or sales tax. They're different. So you need to make sure you understand the differences. And there's a difference between being federally tax exempt and exempt from state income tax. So sometimes states require you to also apply to be exempt from state income tax. So you need to make sure you understand all the nuances and you know the difference. Number 9, sales and use tax. So I mentioned this before when I talked about tax exempt status, but sales tax is different from income tax. Income tax is the money that you earn or the money that's given to you as a nonprofit. Sales tax refers to a tax that's imposed on something that you're selling. So if you're selling a product, like a t-shirt, for example, the state that you're operating in may require that you add sales tax and charge people sales tax. You are going to be required for collecting that sales tax and paying that sales tax to the state. I hope that makes sense. Some states may not require you do it if you're a nonprofit. It really just depends on the state. So once again, if you're trying to sell a product or sell a service, make sure you understand if you should be charging sales tax and what the process is to pay the state the sales tax that you collect on their behalf. Number 10, bylaws. So bylaws are different from the articles of incorporation. The bylaws are basically the governing rules of your nonprofit. They really speak to how your board is supposed to operate, and it speaks to high level how your nonprofit is supposed to operate. All right. So most things that are covered in the bylaws are you're establishing your organization, you're establishing your location, your mission, and your charitable purpose, and it really speaks to how the board runs the meetings, number of meetings that are required, number of board members that are required, officers on the board, things like that, term limits, all that kind of stuff. So you need to make sure you understand the difference between your bylaws and other documents, but also when you're creating your bylaws, make sure you are aligning it with state law, because most times state law has something to say about how nonprofits operate. So they'll have a minimum number of board members that are required. They may have a minimum number of meetings that are required. So you want to make sure you line up with what you're putting in your bylaws with what's required by state law. Number 11, your board of directors. So the board of directors is the governing body for your organization. They are kind of the final stop in the decisions that are being made for the nonprofit. As the executive director, you are managing kind of how the organization operates on a day-to-day basis. You're managing that level, but the board really provides oversight over everything for the nonprofit and make sure that the nonprofit is adhering to the rules and the laws of the land. As board of directors, you are legally and ethically responsible for the nonprofit. It is a serious position to be in. So as a board, they all need to understand what it means and what if any liability that they hold in terms of decisions that are made on behalf of the organization. So make sure when you are developing a board of directors that you are making sure you're educating them about their role and the seriousness of their role. If you need help understanding boards and recruiting boards and all that kind of stuff, I actually recorded a board of directors masterclass. So I went deep. I went in, y'all. I talked about what it means to serve on a board, the 3 duties of board members, duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. I talked about how to recruit. I talked about how to run your meetings. I talked about your meeting minutes. So if you need just to level up and just figure out how to operate as a board, make sure you grab that masterclass. I link it below in the description box. Number 12 is conflict of interest. The IRS is particularly interested in conflicts of interest. So they want to make sure that the nonprofit is disclosing any potential for making decisions that benefit an individual or a group of people. So you have to remember that you're a public organization. You have to maintain the public trust. You have to be accountable to the rules and the laws of the land. And you're not supposed to create a nonprofit to benefit in some way. So if you're funneling business or resources from your nonprofit to something that you have an attachment to or a business arrangement with, that is a conflict of interest. So you just need to make sure that you are disclosing conflicts of interest for key officers and board members of your organization, and make sure you have a policy and a process in place to manage those conflicts of interest. Number 13, I just thought I would throw this one in here. It's your EIN, your employer identification number. So every business needs this. So as a nonprofit, you're going to have to apply for an EIN. Just keep in mind that this is free. So if anybody is charging you to get an EIN on your behalf, please run away from that person. You can literally do it online in 5 minutes. It is completely free and is a very simple process. But that is one of the very first things you have to do. Once you have your articles in place and you're established in the state, then you need to get your EIN, because in order to apply for tax exempt status, you have to fill in your EIN. All right, the next one, number 14, is your DUNS number. So your DUNS number is key if you are trying to access federal government funding and sometimes even state government funding. So I broke down the DUNS number in detail in this video that I'm linking above. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I just want to make you aware that your DUNS number is also free. And basically what it does is establish your business credit file. It's almost like a social security number for your nonprofit, kind of, sort of. And so it helps establish your credit file. Even for-profit businesses have DUNS numbers, and it's a good thing to have and to get early on. So if you're interested in getting your DUNS number, make sure you check out the video I linked above. And again, just like with the EIN, it is completely free. So if someone is charging you to get your DUNS number, please run away. Number 15, your fiscal year. So when you are applying for tax exempt status, one of the questions that the IRS is going to ask you is, what is your fiscal year? So you need to make sure you know what that is. Is it based on the calendar year? Is it based on another time period that aligns with the federal government or your state government? And your fiscal year is basically your financial year. So at the end of your fiscal year, it just dictates when you close out your books and kind of restart the year. That's really all it is. You just need to be clear on what that is so that when you're ready to apply for tax exempt status, you're good. Number 16 is a public charity. So this is so important for you to understand. You have to understand what it means to be a public charity and how that's different from other designations. So when you apply for 501c3 tax exempt status, you're not automatically deemed as a public charity. So you need to understand what it means to be a public charity and how to fill out that application so that you're being designated as a public charity if that's what you want to be. A public charity just means you're a public organization and you get your funding from multiple sources, not just one or two people or one or two sources of income. So I break down public charity status in this video linked above. So if you want to know more information about it, you should check it out because it's really, really important that you need to know. And finally, number 17, which is very much related to number 16, is a private foundation. So in most circumstances, when you're applying for 501c3 status, you're either designated as a public charity or a private foundation. In most circumstances, you are automatically defaulted to be a private foundation. So you have to tell the IRS if you would like to be a public charity. A private foundation has different tax benefits and different tax implications than public charities do. Most nonprofits, in the traditional sense that we think about nonprofits, are public charities. So if you happen to make the mistake and end up being a private foundation, you have to discover that pretty quickly and make sure you're working with the IRS to reverse that decision. And sometimes you may have to wait years until they can make the determination to make you a public charity. That's why I said it's so important for you to know what a public charity is versus a private foundation. And again, I linked that video above because, and I titled it actually, the number one mistake people make when applying for tax exempt status, and that really is it, when you have the wrong designation. So make sure you watch that video and watch it over and over again so you don't make that mistake. So those are the 17 terms you need to know about when starting a nonprofit. Of course, there are a bunch of other terms that would be helpful to know, but I wanted to just call out quick ones, like those quick 17 that came to my mind when I was sitting down writing out like how it would be helpful for people when you're starting a nonprofit. The moral of the story is this: you got to do your research. Starting a nonprofit is different than starting a business. There are many different nuances and just tips and tricks you just need to know, and you really need to do your research before you put yourself out there, because they're just naturally things that you're not going to know unless you do your research. If you need help navigating the nonprofit space, make sure you check me out at www.bossonabudget.com. I have a bunch of resources, workbooks, toolboxes to help you as you're starting your nonprofit, all related to startup, to building your board, and related to fundraising. If you want to sit down and hash out a problem or develop a strategy together, you can have a boss up session with me and we can talk through how to bust through that barrier that you're struggling with. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.